Hello, this is Dr. Stephen Greer, and these are Conversations with Dr. Greer, and I'm joined today with Linda Willitts, who has just returned from France and England with us. We did an amazing expedition to England and France, and we're going to be reviewing today those events and updating you on what happened in Europe in July. And we're also going to be talking about some of the events that have happened recently in the past year at Rio Rico, where we're going to be having a gathering with Colin Andrews, and who invented the term crop circle, and Richard C. Hoagland of the Mars mission and the Enterprise mission, and Dr. Loader and myself presenting in October 2nd through 4th. So we're going to cover a lot of material today in this hour, and I'd like to thank the people at the World Puja Network for hosting us every 2 weeks here. So, Linda, why don't you give a little overview, if you would, what happened in France while we were there?
Well, we were in France from July 10th through 12th, and we did field work each of those 3 nights. And it was really strange there because it didn't even get totally dark till like midnight there, which was a little unusual for us. And we were on a 2,000-acre estate doing our field work, so it was totally dark all around us, or no human lights around us, and it was just a beautiful surroundings. One of the things that happened pretty much right in the beginning is Dr. Greer's compass reversed directions 180 degrees, so that basically north pointed south. And it did that, like I said, pretty much right off the bat when we got there, and it stayed that way through England. And so if we don't know, it may still be that way. We haven't really looked lately.
Well, and that was what was happening during this period is that we were the first night out, actually, at this big estate in France, and we had, I guess, about 60 people with us. And
correct.
This estate is a place where there's been a lot of contact events over the years. In fact, the owners of the estate, whose ancestors trace back to the founding of the French Republic, have said that they have had a number of encounters right over the estate and where the chateau is, and we were doing the CSETI protocols to contact these ETs and to invite them there, and I noticed suddenly that my compass moved literally 180 degrees off of magnetic north. Now, what that means is that there was a complete polarity shift that was coming in through the vector of the compass. It had worked perfectly fine previously. And that often happens when a interdimensional field shift is happening and a craft is in the area. And at the same time, we had these electromagnetic detectors, and we're out in the middle of this huge 2,000-acre estate. There's no chance that there was any man-made source for this, and they started going off in a number of sequences. In fact, we had probably half a dozen of these detectors that began to signal audibly, and these were on various bands, laser bands and other electromagnetic bands. And we also had a very powerful magnetic field flux to the point that the man who is on our team who has this magnetic field meter, the meter was actually going all the way off the scale. And this was happening while we were having a number of orbs and unusual objects moving around us. And so the compass moving off of magnetic north. But what's unusual about it, we've had this happen before. Usually it goes back fairly quickly, or when a craft is in the area, the magnetic field it's like a torsion. And it has to do with the physics of these interstellar spacecraft. When they're in the area, will move the compass. But in this case, it did this. It shifted north, became south on the compass, and stayed that way for weeks because it was still that way when we left England a couple weeks later. Now, this is really remarkable that this could happen, because normally you can't do that unless you have some electromagnets that literally demagnetize and repolarize those. In a compass you have the metallic needles that point north and south or whatever direction. And this is something that happened because of the very, very close contact that was going on at this beautiful estate where we had our team and where we were training people in Europe. And I have to point out there were people from all over the world there. It wasn't just French. There were many people from France, of course, but there were people from Scandinavia, from Hong Kong, from all over the world who gathered there. So it was really quite a remarkable gathering of people. And it was almost like a coming together of people from all over the globe making contact in higher states of consciousness. And the ETs were there very, very powerfully. And we got some wonderful images. We're still in the process of trying to go through all the thousands of photographs and video film footage that we got during this particular event in France. And so anyway, I wanted to clarify about the compass and what that means, because you don't have a compass just shift polarities like that for no reason. And it was clearly a magnetic field torsion. But it happened at the same time we were having many other electromagnetic phenomena happen around us, including the observation very, very close range of craft. And in fact, we had a senior government official who was there for one of the nights, I don't remember if it was the first or second night, who also saw these and actually saw objects that moved across the sky at enormous speed right around us. And so anyway, that's some of that. So what else do you recall, Linda, from France you want to share?
Well, that same night when your compass reversed, we had a real motif of chevron-shaped crafts. We saw some chevron-shaped crafts overhead and, shoot by overhead, but there was also a giant chevron-shaped cloud that stayed for the longest time in the sky when we were there, which was quite unusual. And one of the interesting things that happened during I believe it was it was a meditation that one of the team members from Germany had, and he saw a mandala shape in his meditation. And basically, if you can envision a starfish, the kind that have the skinny legs, where there's like a circle in the middle and then the legs radiate out from that. Well,
right.
This one had like 9 what you'd call the legs, where there was like a circle in the middle, which was the starting circle of each of the so-called legs, which were made up of increasingly smaller circles, but nine circles and 9 legs. And it was quite a beautiful shape, and Dr. Greer had an amazing meditation about it later that evening.
Well, it had a motif. It's interesting. It was almost like a crop circle, and in fact, later there were some crop circles kind of similar to this that appeared in England. But the motif was around the number 9, which is the highest digit, and is a very sacred number. And there were 9 of them that in 12 sections that became 108. And in the Vedic tradition, since we're on the World Puja Network, there's a tradition of the 108 and the number 108 being a very sacred number of for very developed spiritual people and people who are in service to higher consciousness. And so what I think this was about was that this particular image that came through was a symbol of the higher states of consciousness and the very God-conscious interstellar civilizations that are involved in this time in history as the Earth makes this transformation into the future, which is the emergence of an entire new civilization on this planet that will be rooted in the sciences of consciousness and the sciences of higher states of consciousness. So I think this is, the meditation and the symbology of this, it had within it sort of a message about the time that we're coming into.
And it was later, it was actually the third night, we had a most amazing experience with Dr. Greer's compass. For one thing, he did a puja out in the field that night. And then he walked out into the field separately from the rest of our group as the night got quite a bit later. actually, no, this was the second night. Sorry, he walked out into the field, and actually he and some other people actually saw some fully formed ETs, some fully materialized ETs scurry off, kind of like in a little bit of fear with the humans approaching them. And our group was standing back somewhat from where Dr. Greer was, but we all heard an ET. Dr. Greer kind of made a sneeze sound out in the field, and an ET reciprocated that sound quite a distance over, further into the field. But then what was so interesting is then we all came together in this group around where the ETs were dematerialized, and they were shy. They were a little bit leery of all of us humans, 60 humans all standing around, but they indicated their presence by creating a heartbeat sound out of the magnetometer, that when Dr. Greer held his compass, which was still in this 180-degree off north, kind of state because of the ET energy in it, he held his compass near the magnetometer, and the magnetometer beeped in the sound of a heartbeat. And you might want to explain that better, but it was just amazing.
Well, it was amazing because as this whole event unfolded, I have to say that the way that the night evolved was that as I had set up the Puja table, and you have to understand we're in a big field, a hay field that had been cut, and we had a circle, about 60 people, and I had set the Puja table outside the circle to the east of the circle, and what had happened as we were setting up, it was still very bright. It was the sun was low or was just setting. But, at that time of year in Brittany, where we were, as Linda mentioned, there was light in the sky till 11:30, 12 o'clock. So it was still almost like daylight, and it was a clear day. And a craft literally fluxed in and fully materialized about 50 feet from the circle. Everyone on the people on the side of the circle facing that way, and I saw it. And it was this swirl that came in of an energy fully visible with the naked eye, and they were coming in to honor the Puja. And I can talk about this on the World Puja Network because people understand the power of a Puja and the meditative state and the higher states of consciousness that go with these mantras. And so as we set this up, as soon as I'd set up this table and I returned to the circle, but before we were doing the Puja, there was this gathering of these craft that came in, and all of our detectors became very active, and we had this craft that literally materialized very quickly. It was there and then gone. But the people who saw it, it was unmistakable. And a lot of them were people who had never seen anything, and this was something 50 to 60 feet away from us. And what happened with that is that this was a message to the group that the transdimensional interstellar civilizations that are, this, if you will, the origins of a lot of the Vedic knowledge and the higher states of consciousness information were coming for this event, and were there on site. It was stunning, actually, one of the most stunning things I've ever seen in broad daylight at such close range. So, when I after the Puja, and I put the compass out in the field further east in an area that we were asking them to land, we heard a number of metallic things and footsteps moving, both to the west and to the east of where the circle was. And towards the end, later, as Linda was saying, I walked out there, and as I did, myself and several other people saw maybe 4 or 5 or 6 ETs, just a small group of them that were fully materialized. I mean, completely like physical people. These were not people. These were no one in our group, and there were no humans there besides our group. It was a private, secured estate. And I heard them. You could actually hear the feet, the footsteps, as they kind of ran off a little bit because they saw there were 60 people behind me coming. And I think, as Linda mentioned very correctly, they were a bit shy or overwhelmed with that many humans approaching them. And they then shifted, and you heard the footsteps, and then they were gone. There was nothing at all. It was like they dematerialized right there in the field, which is very reminiscent of what the policemen in England last year saw near Silbury Hill, when there was a ET that was this sort of white, tall being, and he stopped and chased this ET into a field. And there were actually, you could hear the footsteps of it, and then there were actually footsteps in the wheat or in the crop, and then this being dematerialized, and literally the footsteps in, and there's nothing there. So you're dealing with trans-dimensional technologies and electronics that allow the materialization, dematerialization, teleportation. But that's what happened in the field. But it wasn't just one ET, it was several ETs. And it was then that after we gathered around and we did a sort of standing meditation out there, that I was holding my compass. Now, the strange thing about this, the man who had the magnetometer, and I have a real sort of mental connection, and he's a very tall, about my height, 6'4" man, and he was holding the magnetometer, and as I approached him with my compass, which, as we've described, had shifted 180 degrees from north to south off magnetic north. The north pole of the compass was facing due south. I approached him, and suddenly I noticed the compass and his magnetometer were beating, beep, 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 beep. It was exactly like a heartbeat. And I saw in my meditative state and sort of remote view state that there was an ET transdimensionally between me and this man who was there, and he was actually showing his heart rate. And we actually timed it, and it was around 80 beats a minute, went up to a little over 100 beats a minute. But it was very consistent, and it was exactly like a heartbeat. And the magnetometer needle you could see beeping, just like you would see on an EKG machine, sort of the waveform. And the compass needle was beeping and moving with it. So we actually got this filmed, and it was really an amazing, although unusual, close encounter. That apparently this was how they, as comfortable as they felt being fully materialized around such a large group of new people, because many of the people who were there had never, been on an expedition out under the stars to see these things, and I think it was quite an initiation for some of the folks. People were in a state of just shock with some of these things that happened, and so that's part of what happened that evening. And we know that it was because of the power of the higher state of consciousness which the group had attained from the puja and the meditation afterwards. And then I think it was on the last night, we had an amazing thing happen where there was a tone coming through one of the electromagnetic detectors that we've never heard before, and it's not a tone that the detector is programmed to make from any man-made source. And it sounded like beep, 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 beep. This went on for about 2 hours, and it was almost like a message or a Morse code, although I think that's too simplistic, that kept coming through this one particular detector. And it happened, and then when at the end of the night, we made a standing circle, and we were holding hands to say goodnight. It ended after over 2 hours. I think it was 2 hours and 7 minutes, which again, it added up to 9. So and it 2 hours and 7 minutes, we had this happening. Now, I have to say, this particular brand of electromagnetic and radar detector we've had with us, we've never heard a tone like that come through it ever. And it was new, and so we're calling this, the French tones, because it was very unique. And at the end of that, of course, we broke circle. Suddenly, over the field where we had seen this craft materialize, when it was still daylight, we saw this beautiful ship that was sort of a white golden color rise upward, and then it started just strobing at us like a giant orb, strobing and strobing and strobing. as it moved off into space and went out, but it was in the atmosphere and completely materialized, and we just looked at it as it left. And we realized then that that tone that they were sending to us, whatever message it was, beep, 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 it was very much, what it was saying to me is there's a new phase coming, because it was a completely new set of tones, and it actually had a message within it. And this went on for, like I said, 2 hours and 7 minutes. It was an astonishing, unusual amount of electromagnetic contact while we were seeing these craft in the area. But then at the end, the way that this particular craft lifted off and then went up into the sky and then was strobing, and it was very bright. But it was as people were breaking circle and getting ready to leave, and they were saying goodbye to us. It was, it was actually like something you would put in a movie in Hollywood, except it was real. And so it was a very remarkable 3 days in France, which is actually the same amount of time we're going to be in Arizona in October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And we're going to go out every night on the roof terrace of this beautiful resort that we're at in Rio Rico. And we're going to be doing these same protocols out under the stars with a group of people. And last year when we did this, if you go to CSETI.org, you can get more, CSETI.org, you can see the photograph of this sort of tetrahedral-shaped craft that was materializing right overhead, right above the group, while we were out on this roof terrace one of the evenings that Raven Nabulsi took. And it's really a remarkable photograph, and it coincides with the group having a great deal of coherence in the meditative state out under the stars on top of this roof terrace in Rio Rico, where we'll be in October. So if you're interested, and it's of course it's a shorter amount of time than the longer CSETI trips. It's basically a long weekend and a Monday, a Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. You can find out more about that at CSETI.org. And we're going to be there, as I mentioned, during the day we're going to be having presentations by Colin Andrews, who coined the term crop circle and was the original crop circle researcher. And he's going to update everything that's been happening in England this year, which is very remarkable. And also Richard C. Hoagland, who had been Walter Cronkite Science Advisor and has the Enterprise mission, and is going to be talking about the remarkable findings of what's around Mars and the Phobos, the moons around Mars, and a lot of other issues around the time we're coming into the big changes. And he's going to go a great deal into what he calls hyperdimensional torsion physics that deal with the physics of the next era that we're going into that involve not only consciousness but energy generation and propulsion. And then Dr. Ted Loder, who's on the board of the OrionProject.org, will be giving an update and an overview of the developments on the new energy front, dealing with free energy and anti-gravity systems and technologies of that sort. So, and then each night I'll be directing the whole group up on the roof terrace of this resort, inviting people to make contact and training people in the meditation protocols and in the signaling protocols, and we'll just see what happens. It's always something unique, but always something wonderful that happens under the stars with a group of people.
We had some amazing things happen during our night field work out on the deck of this resort in Rio Rico last year, and we didn't capture everything. We only captured a small fraction of them on camera because the cameras only cover a tiny bit of the sky, so you have to be looking in the right direction. But we do have just a few examples so far up on our CSETI YouTube site. And if you'd like to see any examples of those, if you go to YouTube and search for CSETI night vision footage, there's just a few examples, a couple from Rio Rico and a couple from Mount Shasta last year that are up.
Correct. Right.
Very cool.
Yeah. So the French expedition was wonderful, and part of the purpose of it, as I mentioned, there were some people who are associated with various governments who were there, and we're really wanting to try to bring people into a state of empowerment where as humans learn how to make peaceful contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations, the people who are in government circles learn this as well and see what the protocols are. Because one of the things that I'm convinced has to happen is, those of you who studied the whole concepts of the science of consciousness and the power of meditation and prayer and the concepts around Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenic fields, is that as more people begin to know about something and to do something, particularly if they're doing it from a higher state of consciousness and purity of heart and expanded awareness, it has an effect that is really transcendental to linear space and time. It affects everyone on the planet. In fact, it affects people on other planets because it affects the conscious structure of the cosmos. And that as we make contact this way and as we begin to visualize and actually actuate these contact events, it really is affecting people even in government circles, military circles, scientific circles. And I'm in Washington a lot, and as I see things happening, of course, things are very slow in political circles, but ultimately what we see happening is an opening up to these ideas, not only in the United States, but around the world. And in fact, even since we have been over in England and France, the British Ministry of Defense has released another very large number of top-secret documents to the public, which got a lot of play in the media. So this is the sort of thing that's happening. And in France, right after we got back, the aerospace group, that there's a aerospace industry professional group that we've been working with that just released a report on UFOs saying that they are of extraterrestrial origin. And this is something that was released within a few weeks of us returning from France, which I doubt is a coincidence. So given the fact that we know the people behind those reports, and you can go to disclosureproject.org and CSETI.org and see the links to this report from the French Aerospace Society. And these sort of developments are not unrelated to the contact work we're doing, because, and a lot of people don't understand this because they think very linearly, is that when you get, like we're going to do in Rio Rico, when you get dozens of people together in this state of consciousness for peaceful purposes, in a higher state of awareness, making contact, visualizing this new future of new energy, anti-gravity, universal peace, world peace, it has a huge effect on people who aren't there and who don't even know you're doing it. Doesn't matter if they know you're doing it, because it accelerates conscious evolution non-locally. And that's one of the great mysteries of consciousness, is that it's always non-local and it's always operating beyond what your linear time-space-oriented mind is seeing, that there's a deeper universal aspect of awareness that we're tied into all the time, and what we're doing is affecting this consciousness, and through this, if you will, this universal communication system of pure consciousness, which everyone's mind is linked into by virtue of being aware and conscious, that when we are working in a group, it has this exponential effect more than if you were doing it by yourself. So if you sit by yourself and do these things, it's good. But if you're in a group, it's exponentially greater. And in fact, there's scientific evidence for this. When Dr. John at the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the PEER Lab, he found that when people were putting their awareness on, say, a random number generator or a robotic machine or something like this, that there would be an effect. If one person did it, there would be an effect that the consciousness of that person, even on this inanimate object or a machine, would have. But if two people who were united or loved each other or had a sense of purpose together did it, it wasn't just twice as much, it was exponentially greater. So imagine what happens when we have 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 people doing this. It literally is exciting and revitalizing every atom in the cosmos. And on the planet, it has a huge effect. And so this shift in awareness is as important as anything we might see or record with a videotape or a camera or an electronic device, because that's really how change happens. It happens on this level of conscious evolution. And people doing this together is so powerful. And it's actually a beautiful experience. I can say that everyone's lives are altered and transformed in the most beautiful ways when they come to these events and do this together. It's really a wonderful experience.
What was really lovely about the France workshop was that 60 people, when they all went home to their various countries, numerous countries in Europe as well as Scandinavia and England and Canada and Russia, one from Russia even, and the United States. And all these people went home and we're getting reports. A number of them have been doing field work and are having some amazing experiences that they've taken to their home area as well.
Oh, yes, and this is what's so exciting. When a few years ago we did this with a team up in Canada near Montreal, and a number of people who went out there to do the work have continued it and literally have had the most amazing contact that's happened with this group. And so one of the things is when you come to one of these events is that you learn exactly how to make contact, what the protocols are, and how to operate out under the stars as a group, which is something that's very hard to do by just reading a book or listening to a videotape or an audio tape. So that's why we encourage people who have the time and can come to these events, because then those folks go back. And what we've done is to have thousands of people now who are all over the world, literally on every continent, who've been trained to do this, who are doing it. And that is going to shift the whole direction of this civilization into this peaceful, universal peaceful civilization where we are going to become interstellar eventually. Of course, we have a lot of changes have to happen on this planet before that happens. But we have to get on that path, and this is how we move the planet onto that path. And the science of consciousness and the knowledge of all the Vedic cities, the SIDDHIS, the abilities that develop from experiencing higher states of consciousness, whether it's remote viewing, precognition, teleportation, levitation, materialization. All these things are things that develop spontaneously as one experiences through the puja and through the meditation, these states of consciousness, and then it gets applied into these contact protocols that we have, and that's what people learn. It's a combination of sort of a master's course in meditation and the Vedas with the knowledge of the science, the modern sciences of technologies that are involved with this, and how to do this and coordinate all of it to make contact under the stars. And so that's really what we try to share with people as we go out together as a group. So we'll be doing that at Rio Rico as well, and hope those of you who can make it will join us there. It's a beautiful place in the desert outside Tucson. Very beautiful setting.
Nice and dark, and we also have quite an international group that turns out for that as well. So,
oh yes, wonderful place.
And so it'll be really exciting. And
then in November, actually, we're going to be up at Joshua Tree National Park.
Yep, back to Joshua Tree.
Yeah, and doing this. So there are all kinds of opportunities to get together. Now, one of the things, before we run out of time, we better, Linda, get on to some of the unbelievable things. For a whole week, we went to England, and we did with a smaller group of people, because it was a longer period of time. It was an entire 7-day expedition. We went to Wiltshire, where Stonehenge and Avebury and Silbury Hill and all these ancient sacred sites are. But also we were staying right near Stonehenge at a wonderful place, and in the epicenter of where all the crop circle activity was happening. So we had a group of about, counting our staff, about 28 or 29 people for a week, and we went out during the day. We would explore the various crop circles in the areas or the sacred sites, and such as going to the Sarsen Stones at Avebury or Silbury Hill, West Kennett, Long Barrow. We went to, of course, Stonehenge, and a lesser-known place very near where we were staying, maybe 5 minutes away, is a place called Woodhenge, which is similar to Stonehenge, but it was made out of wood, so they just have markers, but it's a very ancient sacred site. And then every day we would also go to the new crop circles that were in the area and go into the crop circles and meditate together. And some of the events that happened in broad daylight and some of the photographs that we've gotten in broad daylight from multiple people are almost beyond belief when you see them. This is, of course, we're just back from these trips and we're just getting these things organized, but there was no question that there was really continuous contact from the moment we arrived in England to the moment we left, and I'm not exaggerating. And the contact was on multiple dimensions, not only in consciousness, but in activity in the crop circles, above the crop circles, from fully materialized craft very nearby in the circle with us, to orbs and transdimensional objects, to electromagnetic events happening. Really an entire book and video could be done on what happened this week in England. It was amazing, actually. So
it was totally action-packed, and I think, and it was well assisted by the fact that you did 3 pujas during that week. One at Woodhenge and 2 on consecutive nights inside this crop circle that formed. It was discovered on July 17th. We arrived in England on the 16th, and we were in it the afternoon, and we did our night fieldwork and a puja in it the night of July 18th, and also the night of July 19th we were inside it, and it was a beautiful crop circle that was actually pretty easily accessible, so it was pretty easy to do our night fieldwork in there, and pujas in there which were really powerful inside the crop circle.
The first time we entered that crop circle, the first day, after it was discovered and reported, we went, and it actually appeared the night that we did our first meditation and contact at Avebury, the first night we arrived in England. It was that night that it appeared in this field, and we don't think that was a coincidence. And so that very next day we learned of it and went into it, and it was amazing to see this particular crop circle, and at the very, very center of it was a swirl of crop, and we put the detector in the center of this crop circle, and it started doing what we call the Orion transmissions. Those of you who follow what we're doing up at Joshua Tree, and starting in 2007 and then really getting active in 2008, there were a series of transmissions that came out of the Orion sector of space, near where Orion and Sirius are located. And there's a certain kind of detector and tone that it makes, and those started, and we felt, and people were overwhelmed with emotion. I mean, people just suddenly felt a consciousness that was so beautiful, and people were weeping, actually. And we're in the middle of this field, out in the middle of nowhere. These electronics are going off, and then 2 different people on our team take photographs above us, and there are these spacecraft in them, broad daylight. And it truly, and this was the very first crop circle we went in the first day that we're in England, and this was just the beginning. And so that night we went back and actually did a puja in this crop circle, which was, speaking personally, was an amazing event, just because I had never done a puja in a crop circle. In all my 20 years of being involved with this subject, I just had never done that. So it was one of these things that I have to say was probably one of the most emotionally moving, to the point that people were almost overwhelmed with the beauty. And it was like God consciousness. we're sitting in the middle of this field, and I think that people truly were affected, and that set the tone for the entire week, actually.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, we had in broad daylight, glowing objects were photographed with digital cameras, regular cameras on no special settings. I mean, in various of these crop circles that we were in.
Right.
We have some amazing pictures, and we, like Dr. Greer said, we haven't even really had a chance to go through them all yet and look and see what's in all of them. But amazing experiences.
And one of the things that was really wonderful, there were a number of people there who were had various digital cameras, and they were getting the same images in broad daylight that our regular people were getting.
That's right, yeah.
Emory, who has these really high quality, $5,000 digital cameras, and what I think was very significant is that it wasn't just at night. It was in broad daylight and in the field where there would be objects and orbs, clearly fully materialized and moving around. There are actually some of the most amazing images I've ever seen in the 20 years I've been going to crop circles. And I started, I guess the first year I went was in 1991 or 2. And so, it really is, and we're going to share all of these images at Rio Rico in October. In Arizona from October 2nd to 4th. So we'll have all those things put together in some presentable form by then. And I think that at night, the meditations were so amazing to be in these crop circles. And these were ones that were obviously authentic ones and not hoaxed ones. There were some hoaxed ones that appeared while we were there, and they were rather obvious, frankly. These were ones that would not be able to be hoaxed because of the complexity of their form and three-dimensional nature of them and how they look from the sky. And while we were in the crop circle making contact at night, we would literally have craft fly right over us and right over the circle with all the detectors going off. Mm-hmm. And we would have beings that would quasi-materialize, almost like a hologram, that would appear in the circle and in the field around us, and people would actually then hear them walking, and then they would disappear, just like the policeman last year found near Silbury Hill. So it was a beautiful week in England, and we had some rain, which you would expect, of course, in England, but by and large, we were very fortunate with the weather, which we tend to be, and I have to say, I think it was the most extraordinary week I've ever had in England in the crop circles.
I think one of the really amazing things as well that we had during that week was we had a really strong connection with the ancient peoples, the really pre-Homo sapien peoples of that area, and especially when Dr. Greer did the Puja in Woodhenge, a lot of members really felt a sense of appreciation coming from the ancient peoples of that area.
We find this a lot, that when we do the puja and we're doing these ancient meditative techniques, there is a gathering of not just interstellar beings and spacecraft like we had in France, where this craft went swoosh and just materialized in the field for a couple seconds and dematerialized, but we have a clear sense and actually can often see, and I know in at least one case at Mount Shasta, have heard the voice of beings that were on this planet before Homo sapiens were. So in other words, if you go back millions or even hundreds of millions of years, Earth has had life, and there have been civilizations for which there's no official recognition yet. Someday this will come out. And those beings that have evolved and gone into the astral worlds and the worlds of light, or who may have become interstellar themselves, like we eventually will. In a few 100,000 years, humanity is going to become interstellar, where we'll be going around the universe just like there are ET beings coming here now. We'll be visiting planets that are evolving, that are at our state of development, where we are right now in the early 21st century. And what you find is that these ancient beings really they love what we're doing, and they honor it. And at one time, we were at Mount Shasta doing this at this very secluded site in the National Forest, and I don't want to do it on the phone because it hurts your ears, but there was this primordial cry that came from this being, and it was a being that was not Homo sapien. It wasn't Neanderthal either, but it was one that had been there millions of years ago, predating Homo sapiens.
It was totally audible. I mean, we all...
And everyone heard it. I mean,
it was loud.
And this is the same site where if you get the DVD that's with the book that we have called Contact Countdown the Transformation, there's a book that came out in the last year with a DVD that actually has a tone on it. And it's the same site where we actually had this ET spacecraft appear around us, and it appeared as a tone that Linda got a little bit of recording on a recorder on that's on this DVD that you can get at disclosureproject.org at the bookstore there. And the DVD comes with the book. So what's interesting is that it was in the same site where we had this ancient being. Well, these ancient beings that had been in the British Isles and in that area, and also in France that go back long, way back pre-recorded history, were there when we were doing these pujas and these meditations, along with the ETs. So it's not just one thing happening. There are humans there. There are ancestral beings there. There's the angelic realm, the ETs that are physical beings from other planets that have spacecraft and very advanced technologies. But then there are these ancient ones, we call them, these very ancient beings that have been on the earth who really honor what we're doing because it's a sort of a revitalization of the knowledge, this ancient knowledge, but also a connecting of one cycle to another over time. Because on one level, in the Akashic record of any point in space, everything is already there, of the future, the past, the now. It's there because space has within it consciousness, and consciousness actually is the origin of space-time, emerges out of consciousness. And so when we're in these areas and these states of consciousness and doing the puja, these beings come, and that's what happened in England over and over and over again, and it really is remarkable. So a lot of people are shocked by this because they think, well, they're going to come on something and just see, a UFO in the sky, and there are all these multidimensional events happening. But I said that's because that's the true nature of the cosmos, is that it's multidimensional. It's not just one-dimensional. And so this is a big readjustment in how people have to view ourselves, but also our future. Our future is about really becoming true interdimensional, multidimensional people and a civilization. I have to comment that Dr. Jan Bravo and Dr. Loder and I have worked very closely with a gentleman who's basically worked for all those three-letter agencies, CIA and various, and we've been to his command center and we know him very well. This man is frequently brought to him ancient artifacts that are technological, and we're not talking 1,000 years old. We're talking hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of very, very old that are found in various places. And the intelligence community will come to him for him to try to figure out what it was used for and how it might have operated. So, and, people have heard rumors of this, that there are sort of a secret museum of ancient artifacts that are, archaeological, the things that go back that prove that there was civilizations on this planet thousands, millions of years ago, really, millions. And the fact of the matter is that's true. And this is one of the men that has been tasked with evaluating those devices and those technologies when they are found, because the intelligence community obviously, and we're going to go through this at Rio Rico, Richard C. Hoagland's going to go over a lot of this with what they found on Mars, but that, let's just say people who think there's only been life on Earth for 6,000 years are greatly mistaken. And the intelligence community really doesn't want that known. And it's interesting, some years ago, and I was telling Richard Hoagland this, I think in the last interview we did, in fact, and I met with a scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratories and who followed our work, and And this is a scientist there at JPL, said, look, you're absolutely right. There are these ancient artifacts on Earth, but also on Mars and on the Moon. Who knows what's on some of the other planets in our solar system? One can only imagine. But he said the reason that we can't disclose that to the public is that it would collapse the foundations of all the orthodox religious belief systems on the planet Earth. All those orthodox belief systems and mythologies would completely have to be changed. And I said, well, good. Isn't it time that we, kind of end, it's just childhood's end, and we should evolve to the point of a larger understanding? He says, yes, but there are very powerful interests who do not want that information known by the public. But I can tell you that not only have we had contact with these ancient ones from the past, but we have people in the intelligence community that we work with who have actually been tasked with examining these sort of artifacts, and these are physical artifacts, which are very high-tech, trans-dimensional type of electronic systems. And so this is, someday all of this will be known by the public widely, and our job is to basically do the pioneering work to make sure that can happen.
Well, what's so beautiful when we're on our expeditions, and this happens virtually every time, not only do we have the support of the ancient beings and the ETs and the people from the future and the celestials, but we have the presence of the Avatar, and in both France and England, we smelled the rose fragrance that indicates the presence of the Avatar as well.
Well, yes, I forgot about that. I'm so glad you mentioned it. We were, this particular night when we were going out to the field where there were these ETs, and we had done the Puja
in France,
there was this strong, and everyone smelled it. It's like if you took the oil, what they call the attar of rose in Persia, but the essence of rose oil, that beautiful sort of fragrance, it was all in the air all around us. And we were not anywhere near any roses, right? We're out in a hayfield.
Right.
And it was amazing. And so, at that, because, again, if everyone wants to think in sort of a separation mentality, the sort of Western view of everything is in a little compartmented box. But it isn't. We are physical human beings with physical bodies, but we have a consciousness and a spirit within us that's universal. And there's everything in between. And that's what's happening during these contact events. We're having interstellar civilizations there, but we're also having celestial and angelic presences, as well as these very evolved sort of Godhead figures that appear. And with them will be this sort of beautiful fragrance that is something truly celestial that comes in, as well as the consciousness. I know that first day we were in the crop circle where the craft was overhead and got photographed, and we had the detectors making the Orion transmission tones. The emotion that swept through the whole group was
right.
Overwhelming. I mean, I couldn't speak.
We all felt it.
Yeah, it was just it was beautiful, and it wasn't just me. It was almost everyone was affected this way, and so that's sort of the exciting thing about this is when you realize that we're all a part of a whole, and that the whole, once one enters into this state of wholeness, of consciousness, then all those dimensions and realities are present. It isn't just about seeing a UFO or an ET craft. And this is something most people don't expect initially, because if they study the subject, it's all very been oriented towards a sort of materialistic, reductionist, let's kick the tires on the UFO. And there is that. I mean, there are physical craft and there are physical images and what have you, but what's really amazing is that there are all these other aspects of it that are in the higher states of consciousness that are with it. And this is what you would expect from civilizations that, in order to travel from one star system to another, have to go into and transect, if you will, and go through these other dimensions that are conscious, the astral, the celestial. They have to be aware of this because you can't go faster than the speed of light staying as a solid material object. So this knowledge and consciousness is the big science. And I've said many times that the next once we get these free energy devices and anti-gravity systems out so we can run the world on a wholly new paradigm of energy generation, the real focus for our civilization are going to be these sciences and consciousness. And this is why the Vedic knowledge, the knowledge of the Puja, everything that people on the World Puja Network are studying are going to be not peripheral, but central to our civilization in the next 1,000 years.
And these are the experiences that are life-changing for the people that come on these expeditions. It's the spirituality and the consciousness experiences really that people are just blown away by.
It is. It really is beautiful.
It is. So,
well, we're almost out of time. What I'd like to invite people to do is to go to CSETI, that's CSETI.org, CSETI.org, and you can look and see some of these images that are up and also find out about these upcoming events that are going to be held in Arizona and Rio Rico, this beautiful resort. And there's a whole lot of information there about that, the speakers and what we'll be presenting, and also the resort itself is a beautiful Esplendor, I believe it's called, and it's out in the desert in a beautiful setting. And then you can also find out about, of course, we're going to be at Mount Shasta in a couple of weeks for a week, and then also in Joshua Tree in November. So those of you who want to join us at any of these, just contact us, and we'll try to make that arrangement. And I'd like to thank Linda for joining me today, and particularly like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for giving us this time to share these updates on our adventures around the world as we explore all these dimensions and higher states of consciousness in contact.
So thank you, too, and goodbye for now.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you all. Until next time, this is Dr. Stephen Greer with Conversations with Dr. Greer. Bye-bye.